Thank you, President. My statement will be made up of four small parts. First, propaganda, disinformation, psychological war. These aren't new concepts. A new phenomenon exacerbated by the phenomenon that we've seen during the Syrian conflict is the spread of fake news. For their fabrication, they stoop to even using people even stoop to using children. We don't want the Secretariat of the UN to be used as an instrument in this cynical game. Now, I don't want to remind the Western Troika that summoned today's meeting and that's spoken so grandiloquently of the role that they played in the emergence of ISIS as a result of the US-British invasion in Iraq and as a result of their Palestine, their creation of ISIS. I don't want to remind them of the role those three countries played in exacerbating the Syrian crisis that led to these dreadful consequences and led to the resurgence of Syria and Iraq of terrorist organizations there. But in particular, what I find very strange was the statement by the US representative who built her statement as if she was Mother Teresa. Now, please remember what country you're representing. Remember your own country's track record, and then you can start opining from the position of any moral supremacy. And who's guilty for what? Who's to blame? Well, I think in that story, I think God will tell us ultimately. Now, part two of my statement: information. Reports as of yesterday evening, Syrian authorities are in full control yesterday evening of over 90% of the city of Aleppo. The militants now only hold 3 kilometers squared. In 24 hours, the Syrian army has freed up another 11 neighborhoods in eastern Aleppo. In 24 hours of the regions of Aleppo still under militant control, with the help of the Russian Reconciliation Center for the Warring Parties, over 7,000 civilians have been taken out, including over 3,000 children. We've seen the surrender and exit from the country over 370 militants. Since the start of the operation, over 110,000 civilians have been taken out of the city, including over 444,000 children. Many thousands of children have returned to their homes in the liberated parts of the west of the city. 3 humanitarian actions have been taking place in the last 24 hours, during which civilians in temporary points of shelter in eastern Aleppo have received humanitarian supplies. In Al-Azizi, around 1 ton. In Sheikh Massoun, 1 ton has been delivered in the neighborhood of Al-Malakij. Around 1.5 tons of supplies have got through. For civilians leaving Aleppo under the control of illegal armed groups, hot food stores and emergency food products are being provided to them. In 24 hours, 16 hectares squared of kilometers have been demined, and over 40 buildings have been freed of IEDs, including schools, an elderly home, and a park, as well as 2.5 kilometers of roads. Russian sappers in the last 24 hours have disactivated in eastern Aleppo the parts that have been liberated, have disassembled over 1,000 explosive devices. As a result of the work in the Russian sappers in eastern Aleppo and the Russian anti-mine center, not a single school or hospital. Schools were being used as headquarters for Sharia courts, points of meeting places for militants, as well as factories for production of homemade rockets. None were being used for their original purpose as schools or hospitals. Finally, currently the Syrian army is completing liberation of Aleppo from radical militants, including from al-Nusra terrorists, who earlier repeatedly refused to leave the city through the safe route. Moreover, not only did they continue hostilities against government forces, stating that it was better to die than to surrender, but regularly shelled civilian neighborhoods in Aleppo, killing completely innocent women, children, and elderly. Moreover, they hampered any withdrawal
civilians from leaving areas of control under the militants, opening fire on civilians who are trying to break out towards the west of Aleppo. That fact is confirmed by numerous witness testimonies, including from among personnel from international humanitarian agencies. Now, as to mass arrests and disappearances and bloody reprisals against so-called civilian activists, we have no such information. An hour ago, we contacted our embassy in Damascus, which is in contact with the Syrian authorities and the high command of the Russian army in Syria. This information was categorically denied. Naturally, those militants leaving the city could have been complicit in crimes as well as attacks on a Russian field hospital. We believe that in this situation, these are justified measures, since what we're looking at, these are Al-Nasra Tuzaris, Nuruddin al-Bangi, and as well as other terrorist groups. However, I want to stress this in particular: the vast majority of former members of the illegal armed groups that have handed themselves over to the authorities as a result of the amnesties, having gone through the procedures, returned to their families. Now, the most important thing, the counter-terrorist operation in Aleppo will conclude in the next few hours. All militants, together with members of their family and the injured, currently are going through agreed corridors in directions that they've chosen themselves voluntarily, including towards Idlib. At checkpoints, we have officers of the Russian Center for Reconciliation for the Warring Parties working. And as to arbitrary arrests or other violations of this agreement that was concluded with the illegal armed groups, the Russian military has not reported any such violations taking place. Moreover, this information can be confirmed by representatives currently based in Aleppo of the international of the ICRC, as well as all UN humanitarian agencies working in Aleppo, headed by the resident coordinator there. And the final thing, we are responding to all addresses sent to us, including from the US delegation, with regards to alleged reports on certain abuses or violations of international humanitarian law. I'll read out the text of a response of our officer, our military representative in Geneva, to a request that he received from Jan Ekeland and in Stefan de Mistura's apparatus. He's responsible for humanitarian issues. The response reads as follows: having received a signal that from East Aleppo cases of ill treatment by government forces against civilians, the Russian Reconciliation Center has begun an immediate investigation into such accusations. Yesterday and today, Russian officers visited all liberated regions. They spoke with commanders and civilians. Not a single fact of ill treatment or violations of international humanitarian law against civilians of East Aleppo was discovered. In this incidents that you listed are not credible. At the same time, facts have been detected of crimes committed by terrorists. In the Er Eshadin neighborhood, the bodies were found of people who had been tortured for trying to leave the city. In Ansar Mujahad, mined schools and hospitals were found. In the neighborhood of Insrakisar, documents were collected of a Sharia court with sentences delivered against civilians. All headquarters of terrorists were located either in schools, mosques, or hospitals. Thousands of witness testimonies were collected of civilians of torture suffered at the hands of terrorists. Hopefully you'll have the bravery and courage to report on this. So yes, we really do hope that the Secretariat of the UN has the courage and objectivity to state and report all this and not try to, in a one-sided manner, blame everything on the Syrian government and, as they've said here, to those who support them, including Russia. In so doing, you are guarding the terrorists if you do that. You are protecting the terrorists. Now, we've long said that it was unacceptable when Secretariat officials when they talk about terrorists as being some kind of third-degree detail in Syria and Iraq. It's not a third-degree detail. It is an absolute primary fact, which is so interpreted in Security Council resolutions. As to the Security Council not fulfilling its role, though I beg to disagree. The Council has adopted Fundamental Resolution 2258, December last year, And it's not our fault that certain states seems to try and cherry-pick parts of the resolution, they try and continue to try and seek regime change in Damascus. So let us return to proper work and properly implement the Security Council resolutions that really are able to lead to a settlement of the crisis in Syria. I thank you, sir.
I thank the Ambassador of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I now give the floor to the Ambassador of